And finally, we'll look at the way that expectation affects perceptions. The final area of the factors affecting perception is expectation. And it's the second named study on the specification for the perception topic. So that is Bruner and Minturn, 1955. Again, as it's named on the specification for the AO1, for the knowledge and understanding, you need to know the aim, the method, the results, and the conclusion. This one specifically mentions perceptual set. So again, as a reminder, what is a perceptual set? It's our readiness. It's our readiness to notice, our tendency to notice things in the environment based on what's around us. And so that's why expectations certainly will have an impact on our perceptual set. So Bruner and Minturn, what did they do? How did they investigate that? Well, their aim was to investigate whether our expectations impact our perceptions. And in particular, they were looking at context. So our context is the environment that you're in, the setting that you're in, and how this impacted our ability to view an ambiguous stimuli. So again, you've looked at ambiguous stimuli earlier on in the topic, things that can be interpreted in different ways. There's the duck and rabbit illusion, the old woman and young woman illusion, Rubens vase. So things that can be interpreted in two different ways depending on how you see it. So how was that done in this study? Well, the ambiguous figure here was a figure, and that figure could either be seen as the letter B or the number 13, so a bit like the picture in the top right hand corner. So participants were either shown, so again this was an independent measure design, you would be in both groups here because it would kind of give the game away. So some participants saw the ambiguous figure, the B as it would have been if the letters were shown, either side of the letters A and C. So you'd have A, the figure C, and then ask what was the middle figure, or they would see the numbers. It was either side of the numbers 12 and 14. So it'd be 12 figure and 14. So, you know, it's known as priming in psychology, the things that you've seen beforehand, what impact did that have is what was being looked at. What did they find? Well, those who saw the letters were more likely to interpret the ambiguous figure as a B, and those that saw the numbers were more likely to see the ambiguous figure as the number 13. So what does this suggest? It suggests that expectations do, in fact, affect the perceptual set. And the way that information is presented may have an impact on the way it's perceived. And obviously here in particular, we were looking at letters and numbers and ambiguous figures. So let's evaluate this study. Again, there are some good things here and there are some weaknesses. So, strength. The good thing here is that there are real world applications to the impact of expectation on perception. So if we know that the people's expectations are going to change the way that they see things, we need to try to control that and try to take account of it in real world situations. And in particular here, there's an example used in the military. So that's a real good example of that, but you can think about it maybe in sports or in business. If someone expects a business to fail, for example, does that make it more likely that they're going to see it as failing if it doesn't? Again, if a sports person expects to win and expects to catch that pass, are they more likely to do that? Potentially. So the example here, in 1988, there was a US Navy captain and they mistakenly shot at a civilian plane because they thought it was a military plane. And when this was investigated, the reason for this was that they were expecting to see military planes in the area. They were told that they were military planes and they thought that that's what they're going to see. And so he interpreted the civilian plane as a military one. So his perception was affected by his perception. And so the application of these studies, so the C and PEC, the application of these studies mean the research can be used in the real world. This adds to the validity, the external validity of the results, and is a good thing for Minturn and Bruner's results. Next, there's a weakness though, and actually this particular study was potentially an artificial task. So actually what we got shown here, it's not how expectation affects any sort of perception, this is how expectation affects perception of an ambiguous stimulus. So this could have been interpreted anyway. It was intentionally there to kind of trick the participants. And so these situations, are they actually seen in real life? We spoke about the Navy captain. Well, that was a real life situation, and it wasn't there to trick. And so it wasn't ambiguous. There were it was a civilian plane. It couldn't have been seen in two ways. Clearly it was, but you know, there was a correct answer there. Whereas here there was actually no real correct answer. So the materials used by Bruner and Minturn were intentionally designed to trick the participants and make them make errors. And so the results may tell us little about actual perception when it comes to really important things, as I say, with business or military or sports. And particularly when the stimulus, when the thing that they're looking at isn't ambiguous and there is a right or a wrong answer. That's a problem for the study, the artificial task. And last but not least then, I've mentioned that this is an independent measure design, so research methods revision here, independent measures. You've got different groups of the study taking part in different conditions of the independent variables. So the different conditions here were the priming of whether it was numbers or letters that you saw in front of the ambiguous stimulus. So you couldn't be in both groups. If you're in both groups, if you saw the picture that was on the first slide, you would know what the game is. You'd know that it could be a B or a 13. And so you would say, oh, well, who knows? It's an ambiguous figure. Whereas if you had only seen numbers or if you had only seen letters, you're going to then change you've got to give the answer that you actually think there. The problem here is that you've got different groups of participants in those two different groups. So you've got a group that are just seeing numbers and a group that are just seeing letters. Well, what we don't know is that there could have been other aspects there to those groups of people. So it could have just so happened been that accidentally you had a group of dyslexics seeing the letters, and so they might have been worse, or you could have had a group of really clever people and say they could have been better. And so you've got things that aren't the IV, aren't the expectation, that are affecting the DV, the perception. And so that's an issue potentially for the study. So it could mean that the conclusions of the study might be incorrect. You've got something other than the IV affecting the DV. You could do, there's a method called counterbalancing that you could do that could have overcome some of this. Or there are other designs or other studies that you could potentially do to either back up or refute Bruner and Minturn's results. So hopefully that gives you a bit to think about. So that's that then. That's your AO1 and AO3 for the second named study. You need to know all of those. There's, as I said, a couple of bits of research in there that either supports or contradicts some of these studies. I hope that helps, and that should kind of cover off the perception topic for you. Thank you very much for listening.